Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And opening day is only 10 days away, so we know who the Phils are starting on opening day, and a streak is done. Bryce Harper's having some back issues, but the Phillies don't seem too concerned. Should they be? We're going to break that down as well, and why I don't think it's much to worry about. And also, like I said, 10 days till opening day. So who's the best Philly to ever wear number 10? This one, not too tough of a call, at least for me. We'll discuss it all in today's episode of Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for checking us out. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing if you're listening to us in podcast form. If you're watching on YouTube and haven't subscribed yet, that's the best way anyone can help us out and say, hey, I love your content, would be subscribing to the YouTube channel Locked On Phillies. So appreciate everyone who's done that already and everyone who's going to. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now, if you're a committed listener to Locked On Phillies, you know the past couple of days I haven't posted. I've been in the middle of a launch of a big new morning show at 97.5 The Fanatic here in Philadelphia. So if you're in the actual listening area and you want to hear great Phillies content on the air and a lot of other great content, I'm part of the Kincaid and Salchunas show now on 97.5 The Fanatic. I'm going to be the full-time producer of that program. So I had a bunch of meetings to do for that. But anyway, you don't care about that. You care about the Philadelphia Phillies and their number one starter. And for the past 6 years, they've told us that it's been Aaron Nola by way of naming him their opening day starter. But this year, the change has finally come. Zack Wheeler has been named the opening day starter for the Philadelphia Phillies. Again, this ends a streak of 6 straight years of Aaron Nola being the opening day starter, which that's a miraculous feat by Nola, especially considering he's had such a kind of up and down career here in Philly. We know his talent level has always been high, but his consistency has not quite been there at all. I mean, you'll have a great year, a down year, a great year, a down year, and you're like, how in the world does this guy put together 6 years of opening day starts? Not that he's not talented enough to, but you had to imagine at some point in there someone else would deserve an opportunity eventually, and that time has finally come with Zack Wheeler. Now, I know there's a lot of people in the fan base. Maybe I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a section of the fan base that's like, well, Aaron Nola still isn't that good. He's not consistent enough. He gives up too many home runs. I get the criticism with Aaron Nola. I think largely, if you understand what you're watching when you watch the sport of baseball, we can all agree that the guy's a talented pitcher. The inconsistencies are big-time issues at times. And Zack Wheeler is the better pitcher, I would argue. And I'd say most of the fan base, I think, would be in agreement with that. Not that we're pitting these guys against each other, but Zack Wheeler deserves this opportunity. He probably deserved this opportunity the past couple years, though, because it's not new that Zack Wheeler has been this dominant. So I guess the question that I would be wondering would be, why now? And I think I have a pretty good answer as to why now. Part of making a guy your opening day starter is a commitment to showing them, hey, we believe in you. You're our guy. We're focused in on you leading this rotation. And for Aaron Nola, who has been up and down and clearly mentally has things that he has to process, even if you don't see it on the surface because he's about as deadpan as it comes expression-wise, he's a very mental pitcher. He had trouble with the pitch clock at points last year. He definitely likes to feel comfortable, which is why he came back to Philadelphia in free agency this past offseason, because he's comfortable here. And I think the opening day starter position was an acknowledgement from the organization that, hey, buddy, we trust you. We know you're up and down sometimes, but we're always going to ride with you. I think that's an important thing. Opening day starter has to do with skill level, but there's also part of it that's hugely symbolic, right? you're only the opening day starter once. It's not like if you don't throw your best starting pitcher on opening day, your season's dead and gone. There's 162 baseball games. The rotation changes all the time based on days off, based on injury, all of that stuff. So while it is important, it's not as important as I think some people make it, which is why they continued to give it to Aaron Nola, because he was close enough in production to Wheeler, and they wanted to continue to back up the fact that they believed he was their guy or one of their guys, and they wanted him to believe that too. But what changed? Well, you gave him a huge 7-year deal, and you brought him back here, and you paid him big money, and you gave him what he deserved, and now he's locked down for the foreseeable future. So I think part of it is we no longer have to show Aaron Nola that we're committed to him as a player. The organization, it's unquestionable their commitment to Aaron Nola because they put a dollar amount on it and they spent that money this offseason to say, come back and play here. So I think that's part of it as well. You don't have to really, like, before you pay Aaron Nola, you could say you like him all you want, but short of actually giving him that big contract, he's probably wondering, hey, does this team actually want me here longer term than what I've already been? And he's been here a minute, but you get what I'm saying. Mentally, I think it was a boost for him to be the opening day starter, but I think that's no longer necessary because of the big contract you've given him. It's kind of like how you have to tell your girlfriend you love her every day, and then you buy the diamond ring, and all of a sudden, once you propose, it's like, okay, you should know by now that I love you. Like, that's kind of what it is. The Phillies have reached that point where they bought the diamond ring for Aaron Nola, which is that major contract, and now they're like, Wheeler's going to start opening day. You're going to be fine with it. Team's going to be good. Still love you, Nola. I think that's how it goes. But there's another factor in this too. It's not just that Zack Wheeler's been outstanding, because he has been. Like, he is the best pitcher on this staff. So he fully deserves it based on merit. This is not simply, we're tired of Nola being the opening day starter, we're going to switch it just to give somebody else a chance. No, Zack Wheeler has earned it this year. He probably earned it last year. He may have even earned it the year before. But why now? It's not just the contract. Aaron Nola has a kid due. And I believe the due date, from what we've been hearing, I don't know. I don't want to dive too deep into his wife's pregnancy, right? But it's like April 4th has been the date I've been hearing, and March 28th is opening day. And I think part of what the Phillies are looking at, and they're saying, opening day starter is a big responsibility. It's symbolic, but it feels big to these players and feels big to the fan base as well. And this dude is probably focused on making sure his wife is okay and is wondering, hey, am I going to have a kid? And if this kid comes a couple days early, 6 days early, am I going to have to not pitch on opening day? Or I guess it'd be 7 days early. Bottom line is, I don't think Aaron Nola is going to be like, quote unquote, distracted. But with that going on, with the contract being paid, with Wheeler having been so dominant, I think it was the perfect storm of everything coming together where you're just saying, all right, Wheeler's our guy this year to start on opening day. Nola will give you the second start, or if you have to be away for the birth of your child, we'll figure that out. But this was not so much a changing of the guard. I think it was a changing of how the Philadelphia Phillies approach the handling of their top two pitchers. And I don't think, because people have made this argument, I've seen it. The Phillies have been babying Aaron Nola for years by making him opening day starter, even though Zack Wheeler deserves it. I don't think it's like babying him, even though I do think they were doing it to try and help him mentally. I don't think he was asking them for that, and I don't know that he truly needed that responsibility to be the opening day starter. Aaron Nola said himself that he thinks Zack Wheeler should be the opening day starter. He said that earlier this offseason. So I'm sure he's got no issue with it. So people who say that are partially right, but mostly I think it's just this was the time to establish a new precedent. You also gave Wheeler the big extension this offseason. They're both going to be here for a while, and Wheeler has become the better pitcher. So this was the transition to say, Wheels is our guy going forward. And again, bottom line too, it's a fun thing to talk about because it's good to know who's going to be taking the ball against the Braves on March 28th. Bottom line is this. It's one game. It's more symbolic than anything. Does it matter as much as we think it does right now? Not really. So happy for Zack Wheeler. understanding why they moved away from Aaron Nola. It's not a knock on him whatsoever. And this is a good decision by the Phillies, in my opinion. I think that's how it should have went down. So there you have it. The Philadelphia Phillies have a new opening day starter. 6 years it's been Nola. Zack Wheeler takes over the responsibilities this year. So in 10 days, walking onto the mound at Citizens Bank Park is going to be wheels. And that's going to be awesome to see, because that's going to have the feel of a playoff type game at Citizens Bank Park with the Atlanta Braves in town. I can't wait. The second you name a starter, you start to get into the zone where you're like, oh, wow, we're really, really here. It's kind of like when the plane takes off, there's just runway and runway and runway. And then you first feel like the front of the plane lift off and you're like, oh, yeah, we're going for this thing. That's what it feels like when they name the opening day starter. It's like you just start to lift off the plane and you're like, flight is right around the corner. In this case, baseball season is right around the corner. Coming up next, though, it's not all sunshine and roses down in camp for the Philadelphia Phillies. And Bryce Harper has had some back stiffness. Should we be concerned about it? Well, I guess always you're concerned if one of your best players or your best player overall is kind of banged up right now. But I'll tell you what the Phillies think. I'll tell you what I think. And I'll tell you what you should probably think as far as how worried you should be about Bryce Harper's back issues. So we'll get into that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. All right, folks, you know what time it is. It's tournament time. And you could say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. They've jacked that up just for the tournament. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. It's going to be a tough one. If you get that right, that's going to be one heck of a payout. You just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. So go ahead and check out our friends at FanDuel. They're the best. Okay, let's get into the difficult topic of the day because people are concerned about Bryce Harper's back issues. So Harper's been sitting for a couple days down in Clearwater, not playing in game action because he has back stiffness. And people hear that and they think about last year and they think about taking time to come back from the Tommy John surgery recovery. They think about the year before when he incurred that UCL injury that led to Tommy John. And prior to that was hit by that up and in Blake Snell fastball that led to him having to have his thumb repaired. They think about issues of the past with Bryce Harper, and you say, okay, is this guy getting to a point where wear and tear is already starting to affect him? And if so, is this something that we should be worried about? Like, he is asking for an extension. Like, he's looking for a longer term, more money deal with the Philadelphia Phillies. Can you give that to a guy you think is breaking down? Is it something we should be concerned about in the more immediate? Like, will he be ready for the season? Starting to have these issues 10 days ahead of opening day, or I guess when they started, it would have been like 14 days ahead of opening day. That's not exactly ideal. We are expecting healthy Bryce Harper. It's one of the feathers in the cap of people who are predicting a better start and a better season overall for the Philadelphia Phillies. And if he's not available, that's going to make it very difficult for the Phillies to compete at the level that we want them to. So we want him to be available, but he's been sitting out the past couple of games. First, I'll tell you what the Phillies think about it because Rob Thompson talked about this. And he said there's zero concern with the Philadelphia Phillies' focus on Bryce Harper. Like, there's just zero concern with his back stiffness. Not an issue. They're being very precautionary. It's almost like what we would probably want them to do, right? If you want Bryce Harper healthy, and every single Phillies fan should, if you want him healthy, then you're going to look at protecting him as much as possible until it matters most. And frankly, spring training games don't matter. The other thing that I think is important to note is the player. If this was Johan Rojas, who we're going to talk about in tomorrow's episode, and what's going on with the outfield, my goodness, it is a trip. But if this was Johan Rojas and he was trying to make the team, he was trying to get reps against top-level pitching, he needed reps in spring training, Well, you might want him to try and push through a little bit, even if he's not 100%. If you're like 95% or better, then go ahead and play. This is Bryce Harper, and he does not need spring training. Like, he needs it a little bit to get his timing down, but he is an all-world talent. He's unbelievable. He's done this before. He's been playing this level of baseball for God, so many years. I can remember him on the cover of Sports Illustrated back in the day, the chosen one, to a nod to the old LeBron cover. Like, this dude does not really need to get reps in spring training. Will they help him? Sure. But is it more important he's healthy? Absolutely. So what does that mean? I said like 95% plus a guy like Rojas would be playing to try and prove he can be on this team. If Harper is a smidge less than 100, like 99.9%, fine. They should shut him down just for spring training until he's back to 100%, because there's no need to risk anything. That seems to be how the Phillies are taking it. They're like, yeah, he's good, but he's got a little bit of stiffness, and we're just going to play it very conservatively. I think that's the right way to approach it. Now, let me tell you how I feel about it. And my concerns are more long term than anything. I don't think this is going to affect the season. If there's an injury that comes later, I don't think it will be because of this. Like, I think he's fine. I take the Phillies at their word. They said Brandon Marsh was going to be fine by opening day. He was fine well ahead of opening day. He's well on track to start in left field. The Phillies are not going to like completely lie to the fan base about whether or not Bryce Harper's fine. And it seems that they're fine. Rob Thompson, as I hit my microphone, Rob Thompson, for all his faults, has always shot the fan base straight when he talks to the media and he conveys his thoughts through that. So I trust what they're saying. Long term, though, back stiffness, this is just a blip on the radar. I don't think it's going to be a factor whatsoever. It does remind you, though, how violent Bryce Harper's swing is, the stress he puts on his body, what it's going to be like for him to play first base rather than just DHing. Remember, like, his body's not used to being in the field every single day. He did it for part of the end of last season, but still, it's not a 162 game grind. He was out for a month and a half. He DH'd for like 2.5 months, and then he got a little bit of time at first base. You got to build yourself back up to that. And there will be a point where Bryce Harper, because of the way he plays the game, diving headfirst into camera wells and stuff like that, he's going to get bumps and bruises. And as you get older, that's less sustainable. So long term, am I worried about Bryce Harper's health? Not yet, but this is kind of I could see how I would potentially be worried in a year or two if he continues to have these little nagging aches and pains and everything like that. How you should be feeling as a member of the fan base, I think the best way to do it is not to worry. People drive themselves insane worrying about what the Phillies are going to look like 8 years from now. If they're having a parade on Broad Street come October or November, like, I do not care what they look like in 8 years. I don't. So I think the right thing for the fan base to do is focus on the here and now. And in the here and now, Bryce Harper is fine. So ultimately, should you be worried about Bryce Harper and the back injury or the back stiffness? They're not even like really calling it an injury, and how that'll affect him ahead of opening day? Absolutely not. I think they're being super cautious. I think they're being very understanding of how important Bryce Harper is to this team. And if he has something that becomes worse, even if he misses 2 weeks, it changes the dynamic of the season a little bit. This guy could have an MVP caliber season, as could probably a couple of his teammates. Trey Turner, first off the bat. I mean, there is capability of Bryce Harper to be the best player in baseball this year. And you want to make sure that you give him every opportunity to do that by protecting him and making sure any sign of injury, you sit him down. And that's what the Phillies are doing right here. He'll be fine. He should play on opening day. I'm not too worried about it. I'm not worried about it at all because the Phillies told us not to be. So that's a little update on the Bryce Harper situation. No worries, at least as far as I'm concerned. You guys can all laugh at me if this ends up being a bigger deal and be mad and say, Connor, you told us everything was fine. I believe it is. So that's where I stand. Coming up next, again, 10 days till opening day, folks. So who's the best number 10 in Philadelphia Phillies history? Easy selection for me. We'll see if you agree with it coming up as we wrap up Locked On Phillies. Let me go ahead and tell you about eBay Motors, though. because passion, drive, and patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle. Listen, just like Bryce Harper's back, you want to be careful with that and make sure he's not hurt. You want to be careful with your vehicle. Make sure you're getting the right parts and everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. They've got over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. And you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And this is even better. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your vehicle alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, it's time to pick the best number 10 in Philadelphia Phillies history, as we are 10 days away from opening day. Yes, it's the 18th as I'm recording this. By the way, 10 days till opening day and a couple of days where I was launching the new radio show that took up a crazy amount of my time. We're going to go every single day from here to opening day. We're going to have a new episode of Locked On Phillies. That includes weekends. We're going to ramp up to the season with that. Then we'll be back to 5 episodes a week once the season begins. But we're going to go on a heater of episodes and great content because there's a lot of stuff you guys need to know about ahead of opening day. There's a lot of things that we're going to find out about ahead of opening day. But let's keep the main thing, as Jalen Hurts, quarterback of the Eagles, says all the time. The best number 10 in Philadelphia Phillies history. It's actually a really competitive number. What you'd imagine once you get down into the lower double digits is there's more players who wore these numbers. Currently, there's a guy that when things are all said and done could have claim to this. JT Realmuto obviously wears number 10. He has since 2019. He's been the best catcher in baseball for a lot of those years. He could be, because of his offensive production, a future Hall of Famer. That might feel like a stretch right now, but see what his compiled numbers look like when everything's said and done for JT Realmuto. But he's not to the point where he could be the best number 10, at least with this jersey number. There are some other heavy hitters. Like, of course, who could forget about Boom Boom Beck, who wore the number 10 back in 1942? Okay, I'm not talking about him. There are 2 other guys that I'd really consider for the best number 10 in Philadelphia Phillies history. Ben Francisco. No, I'm also kidding. Juan Pierre. No. There are some bad ones in there too. I actually like Juan Pierre a lot. But the 2 guys that deserve it were both guys that played here in the 80s. One only for 2 years in the 80s. The other, a lot of his career in the 80s and 90s. Darren Daulton deserves so much acclaim. An amazing person, an amazing player, a huge part of that 93 team. Like, he was kind of the heart and soul of some of the generation right above me's favorite teams in Philadelphia Phillies history. Never a World Series champion, but he was here from 83 to 97, and he saw some really tough years for the Phillies and some really great years for the Phillies. And he's a guy that's beloved in this city. So Darren Daulton, definitely in the conversation. I just simply, for one reason, have to give it to the other guy that was earlier 80s and 70s, and that's Larry Bowa. Now, Larry Bowa is a 5-time All-Star. He won the 1980 World Series with the Philadelphia Phillies, so he's got that ring. 2-time Gold Glove winner. And the other thing that really puts it over the edge for Bowa, he was manager of the year for the Philadelphia Phillies. Like, once you come back and you manage the team and you have success doing that too, after having such a great time playing shortstop for the Phillies in a really solid era of Phillies baseball, like, it's got to be Larry Bowa. Could JT Realmuto ever do something to step over Larry Bowa? I think, honestly, the only way to do it would be to come back, manage the team, win manager of the year, and do better than that. Like, he excelled in multiple ways, and Larry Bowa is still around the ballpark every day. I've been lucky to have the opportunity to talk to the man face-to-face a time or two, and he's still as intimidating as you'd imagine he is when you see him in real life. I feel like he's going to yell at me for something I did wrong on the baseball diamond back in college or something. He wasn't even there for that. So Larry Bowa just he's one of those cornerstones of Phillies baseball of a generation. And that's why, in my opinion, he's the best number 10 in Philadelphia Phillies history. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, we're going to dive into, because I haven't given you my latest opening day roster prediction, I'm going to give you that tomorrow. And we're going to have a conversation about what's going on in the outfield. Also, obviously no Mailbag Monday today because it was a bit of a busy weekend. We're going to do Mailbag Tuesday. So tomorrow I'll answer some questions from the audience as well, including someone who chimed in on my personal Instagram account. Was like, hey, can you mention this on the podcast? And I'm like, you went through all this trouble? Absolutely, I will. So we'll get into a bunch of stuff tomorrow. The best Philly to ever wear number 9. Some great stuff still coming as we draw closer to opening day. But that's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. So again, thank you so much for checking us out. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing, giving this video a like if you liked it. That little thumbs up helps significantly. So I appreciate all of that. And I'll talk to you next time on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.